LaTonya Wilkins, welcome to Partnering in Leadership. I am thrilled to have you in this conversation with me.
Oh yeah, I'm so happy to be here. I'm so excited.
I absolutely love leading below the surface, how to build real and psychologically safe relationships with people who are different from you. Psychological safety is a favorite of mine. But before we get to that, Latanya, would love to know whereabouts did you grow up and how did your upbringing help you become the kind of leader and person you've become?
Yeah, so this is an interesting question, and when I answer it, sometimes people are really surprised. But I was born and raised in small town Iowa, which is I'm in Chicago now, and so it's a state over. For those of you that don't know, it's not Ohio, it's Iowa. I get that a lot. And actually, my grandma migrated to the Midwest from the South, so from Jackson, Mississippi, and it was during the Jim Crow era. And my mom didn't want to drink from a colored fountain, so she took the kids up north, started in Topeka, Kansas, and then ended up in Des Moines, Iowa. So that's why I ended up there. And started off in Marshalltown, Iowa. Grew up across the street from a golf course, and my dad was a big golfer. My dad was a very hard worker. He was a blue collar worker, and he worked in meat packing plants. And my mom worked also in manufacturing, off and off, on and off. And how was I raised? Well, I was raised in a small town. I think it was, I lived there till I was 10, and then we moved into Des Moines, and my parents divorced. And so, how did this affect me? Well, I would say that my small town life was a little disrupted when I had to move to Des Moines. And I didn't really feel like I fit in there as much as I did. And that's what Leading Below the Surface is all about. I never fit anywhere and started when my parents divorced and I was in this town and like all the kids would make fun of me and I didn't fit into any group. And I talk all about this in my book. And so it's real stories. Um, I think one of the things that did teach me, so my dad, again, he was blue collar, but I always tell people he was one of the most smartest men I've ever known because he would read. He was a really diligent reader, and he was smart, but he didn't have a college degree. And so I always valued that. I valued education, even though my parents didn't like force it on me. It was something like it was just assumed that I would go to college, and like they weren't going to do anything if I didn't, right? Do you know what I mean? But it was just like I was the smart kid, and so I was the first one to get a bachelor's degree in my family. I mean, there's been other folks that have gotten associate's degrees. So that's a little bit about. I think it's also made me more. I think my work ethic is just it's been really good and strong because of that. And I would also say that because of my upbringing and having that experience early in my life, again, where my parents divorced and the small town was kind of taken from beneath me, I had to I had to have resilience, and I hate that word sometimes, but that's what I'll call it today. At a young age, I had to adjust and figure out what life was going to be like for me since I didn't fit in.
Latanya, what a beautiful way of describing your upbringing and a below the surface way. I mean, one of the things you talk about in terms of leadership is the need for that authenticity. And you have that ability to be your authentic self and share your authentic self. So, why is it that we have so much difficulty? I do ask every one of the leaders and authors that I have conversations with about their upbringing, and some are willing, like you, to go below the surface, and many are used to above the surface canned responses. What is it that it takes for leaders to be able to, like you, go below the surface and be able to show some authenticity and vulnerability?
Yeah, so that's really interesting you asked that question. And it's a multitude of things. I think so. I think it's chapter 5. It's all about navigating a surface world in the book, and I talk about how the world is surface, and what that means is that I spent a lot of time in corporations where I was always given this statistic around, hey, it takes people 5 seconds to decide whether or not you're worth it to them in a job interview, or, it's a first impression, you only have 30 seconds. And they would say this like it was giving me advice and it was like this going to be this enlightening thing. And I was like, wait, why is that? Like, that's just kind of gross. Like, I don't want to conform to that. Like, that's bizarre. Like, you have problems if you're going to tell me, like, you're not going to give me a chance after 5 seconds. Like, that's really ridiculous. And so the thing is like, just in that, there was this kind of corporate way of like corporate norms and corporate way of life, right? And I call that the dominant leadership standard, where we've been okay with that stuff, right? We're like, okay, well, yeah, our values are competition and being relentless, and we are going to be what's obsessive. That's a new thing, like, right? And they come at you with these values, and that's what's accepted. That's what's socially accepted. And I talk about this dominant leadership standard so much because it was so prominent. And so that's why people have a hard time getting below the surface, because they've been in these companies and these environments where everything is surface. And so they're trying to navigate a surface environment and accept it as a surface environment and navigate it, instead of challenging themselves to get below the surface. And so, yeah, there's a lot of bragging in that. I mean, you could tell when people hide behind the words, or they're bragging, or they're like, when they introduce themselves, they're probably telling you the surface things, like maybe the awards they won and all that, but that doesn't really matter. Like, I talk to people around the world all the time, and nobody cares. Or what does that even mean if you were 30 under 30? Like, nobody knows what that means and around the world. You know what I mean? So that's what I think. It's like we've just been so socialized in this social world. I mean, in the surface world, and we think that's what we have to talk about.
And a lot of times, Latanya, what I find is we don't ask questions about the systems and the environments around us. So, one of the things that I find interesting is that you challenge those assumptions and you ask questions about the so called norms that many people in business operate under. What is it with you, and why did you challenge, in your mind, the way things operate in the world around you?
Ah, I didn't have a choice. And let me tell you that. So many of you probably are going to read my book or read my book. And it sounds, I mean, you'll feel my pain. Like, one of the executives that I coach, a couple of them have actually said, I feel like I was walking through this with you. And I think that, oh, okay, we need to scratch that. Can you ask me the question again?
Yeah. So one of the things that I like about you telling your story, Latanya, is that you are willing and you are able to question the way the world around you operates and the frameworks that people accept by default. What is it in you that caused you in the business world to question that way of operating, which is very much a surface level relationship that leaders have with people?
Yeah, so why have I questioned it? And when you're reading my book, some of you are going to read my book or probably have read my book, you're probably thinking, wow, well, Tanya is able to do this so well. She's able to do this so easily. Even though I read her book and I could sense there's a lot of pain in this process, like LaTonya was able to do this, but it wasn't an easy thing, right? I I had to start with, just sitting in the meandering in the muck. And I talk about this a lot in the book. And what that means is sitting with the discomfort of the world and how it is, without trying to solve it, And so, it's, when I was at the Geese College of Business, that's where, I was, for those of you that don't know my career, so I spent a lot of time in Fortune 500 leadership development, talent roles. And then I moved to the Geese College of Business, some teaching and some culture work there. Then I did my coach training and did coaching and, coach, change coaches, speaking, all that. And it wasn't until that I was at the Geese College of Business and I was getting into the research of this and the evidence-based pieces of this. And a lot of the stuff is, some of the studies are in my book around neuroscience, psychology. And I wasn't able to feel confident challenging all this until I read that research and until I could see, hey, there's an explanation behind why we're this way. And I didn't want to come at it like, I don't, some people do, and that's okay. But I wanted to come at it in a way that was a coach-like way, not in like aggressive advising way, because that hasn't worked. And so yeah, that's when and why I started challenging, is when, again, I first had to see like some of the research behind it, and then understand how I was going to challenge it, which took a long time to figure out.
And you have challenged it by a lot of your own great storytelling, and as you say, the evidence that you back it up with and the research you back it up with. Now, you talk a lot about being a below the surface leader as opposed to above the surface leader. What is a below the surface leader?
Yeah, so a below the surface leader, there are three prongs. So first off, let me tell you how many below the surface leaders are. So I talked about the Pareto principle, 80-20 rule. I think, this is anecdotal in my experience. 80% of leaders are surface, or sorry, 80% are surface and 20% are below the surface. Below the surface leaders, there's three prongs, and there's more than this, but there's three prongs that are probably dominant in every below the surface leader. First, they practice real leadership, so which is relatable leaders, equitable, aware, and loyal. So again, relatable, equitable, aware, and loyal. I spent so much time building competency models and companies, and again, those models were based around very competitive values. So it's the real model, or the real approach, is based on how we lead, and not what we're producing. It's all how we lead. So that's real. The second thing below the surface leaders do well is they they're empathetic listeners. They practice empathy, and I have a whole chapter called "Living on the Edge with Empathy," and it's all about how can we access. I use the word access a lot. Access empathy. Everybody can access empathy, but only few of us choose to do it. And I talk about how to access empathy through two different types of listening, which is active listening, person to person, below the surface listening, and then person to belonging listening, where you're actually listening with both the senses. So I talk about that. The third one is below the surface leaders are psychologically safe, and they create psychologically safe relationships and teams. And what that means is they allow people to bring their entire selves to work if they choose. They don't punish people for thinking differently. They don't punish people for having constructive feedback. But these are the three things: again, real leadership, empathy, and also creating psychologically safe relationships. Below the surface leaders, you know who they are, because the minute you walk into a room, you feel seen. And I want everyone to take a minute and think about those leaders in your life, because there's probably two or three that come to mind right away. And those were the leaders that people probably said, like, you probably describe them as good people, but they're below the surface leaders, and they are people that they want to do this and they take pride in doing it, and that's what below the surface leaders do.
Yeah, and I would love to touch on each one of the elements that you mentioned, Latanya. But before we get to it, though, one of the challenges that I see in leadership is that oftentimes, whether it's the podcast listeners who I think have a leg up because they are the kind of people that are looking to improve, or leaders in general that I coach and guide, in most instances, they nod and see themselves as being the kind of leaders who are empathetic and are part of that 20%. I agree with you, 2080. However, many of them have extremely big blind spots. So, how is it that leaders can reduce those blind spots and truly embrace that below the surface leadership that you talk about?
Yeah, that's an interesting one, because I what I a lot of what I do in Change Coaches is I coach executive teams to create cultures of belonging. And I do a coaching approach because it's, again, I don't tell people what to do. I kind of let them make, the connections themselves. I enable them to do that. And so how can you see your blind spots? Well, I have a lot of activities in the book, and that's the reason why I wrote it that way. There is a chapter in the book, chapter 6, it's called Becoming a Below the Surface Leader. And I talk a lot about the notion of becoming and what you're becoming as you're going through this process. And so I strongly suggest that even if you buy the book, if you don't buy the book, whatever, if you do buy the book, spend a lot of time on those assessments and just be really, really honest with yourself and do it, come back to those, every 6 months or whatever. But that's how you do it. It's through, this is also the A and real, aware. It's becoming very aware of who you are and what you do. It's also becoming aware and accepting that we live in a surface world, right? And yeah, we can break the system, the surface system that's out there, but we all have to come to terms with ourselves that we're part of it. I was part of it. I tell stories about how I ran talent review meetings, and I'm almost embarrassed of that today, like the way that I talked about people like they were cogs, in the machine. And if they didn't function like a machine, then they would be derailed, right? And so that's the thing I would say is, like, go through those exercises, do a lot of reflect, look inside yourself first, because a lot of orgs come to me and they're like, how can we change it? Well, you got to look inside yourselves first. So start there, and then practice the forgiveness of yourself, because again, we all live in a surface world, right? And we've done what we need to do to get by. And so how could you change the track going forward?
Yeah, it's interesting that you mentioned that because from what I hear from you, there are a couple of elements. To a certain extent, we are swimming upstream in that it is a surface world, and therefore we need to constantly be aware of it to try to stick to being below the surface. Otherwise, the world around us, whether it's social media or the relationships or the work practices, bring us and pull us back up to the surface. And there's an element of a growth mindset in there. We aren't there yet. None of us are there yet. And therefore, we need that greater awareness in order to maintain and be in a below the surface level.
Yeah, I absolutely agree. And and again, I'm going to go back to my leadership development days, because it's still relevant, and the way that people are doing it is still very similar. And I'm sure many of you that are listening did 360s, and I still do 360s, and that's fine and all, but that's surface. I'm sorry, it is. It's surface, and it's going to be, again, the corporate values that are the ones I mentioned in the book. And when I'm talking about awareness, and we are talking about awareness, we're talking about that stuff that you don't want to touch. It's that stuff that you don't think you need to touch. It's stuff that you think is like better left to a therapist, and you don't want to see a therapist, so I'm not going to do that. That's the stuff we're talking about, and none of that stuff is true. And if you have to meet people where they are today, and the world is changing, especially after coming out of this pandemic, and people's values are changing, and people are getting enlightened, and they're figuring out what those are, and if you can't look inward, you're not going to keep your people.
You can't, LaTonya, have above the surface simplistic tools and systems if you want to go below the surface with your own understanding. Again, and I've seen, and there are times where, for example, 360s are applied effectively when used appropriately with a coach. In most instances, I actually love the way Tom Peters puts it. He says you give a blunt tool to a bunch of people with biases and they hammer away at the individual with their individual biases. We are very well aware, and I'm sure you've seen it in your own experience, that when a 360 is done on a female leader, versus a person of color versus a person that typically practices leadership the way it was traditionally done, the responses are very different. So many of the individual's biases contribute to that 360. So we don't want to use blunt tools and objects with surface questions if we want to go below the surface in understanding our own leadership and becoming a below the surface leader.
Oh, yes. Don't even get me started on that. It's like, it's almost, this reminds me of when, because I, teach college classes, when we give students questionnaires to evaluate us. And this has been found that instructors of color get lower scores on average. So why are we still using that flawed way of evaluation? I mean, there's got to be another way. And then whenever I ask about that, it's like, well, it's the wells, and I talk about those in the book. Well, this is all we have right now, and we take that in consideration. Do you? But yeah, it's there's an issue with bias and biased people evaluating people that they are biased against that they don't admit.
Now, LaTonya, you mentioned psychological safety, and Amy Edmonston wrote the foreword to your book, which is outstanding. Love her work on psychological safety. What is the importance of psychological safety, and how does creating a culture of belonging interplay with psychological safety in organizations?
Yeah, so I knew that I wanted Amy to write my board from day one, and I was so honored that she did it and she endorsed the book in that way. I knew because of a couple of things. I knew number one because when I read Amy's work and I came across it, I was like, wow, this is brilliant. This is like my entire life. It's like I was one of those people in these large companies that were stocked full of DEI people, quote unquote, and nothing ever helped me, right? And when I read Amy's work, I'm like, wow, this is like next level. Like people need to hear this. And so why is that so important? Why is it next level? Well, it's because it's it's not about just representation, which is where a lot of works go. It's about like a lot of the issues that I had in my own career and when I coach people or other ones at work in their career. It's psychological safety. It's like being the only one at work and not feeling like you can challenge, not feeling like you can be different. I mean, I coach a lot of Black women who are the only ones on the executive team, and just the way they operate or approach their work is not safe, right? And so that's when we go back to that dominant leadership standard. And how is this skipped over so many years? Like just to be able to talk about this in those terms, or like when your boss asks you for feedback and you give them feedback, and then all of a sudden your review is low, like that's not psychologically safe. Or being able to do your best work and you make a little bit of a mistake, not even a mistake, but something the company didn't want, that's psychological safety. And so it's really paramount right now to the future of belonging. And how does it fit in? Well, it fits into belonging because if you can't bring your unique skills to the workplace without criticism, I mean, yeah, you can have some sort of discourse debate or something, but if it's like a lot of what I went through was like, this is not the conventional way to think. You have to think this way. This is like the wrong way. That's not psychologically safe. So then I just wouldn't want to put my ideas forward. And so when you feel like you belong, which I had a couple workplaces that only like one or two in my entire life where I felt like I completely belonged. That's what I had, and it wasn't even, it's interesting because Yeah, it's great when you can look around and see people that look like you, but it is like a different level when you go in and people accept your ideas because of you and because of what you bring to the table. And that's psychological safety.
Yeah, and that's really important, and you do emphasize the importance of it in creating that culture of belonging. The other thing I love is that, with respect to belonging, you talk about person to person listening and person to belonging listening. What is that?
Mhm. Yeah, so I talk about below the surface listening as a way to access empathy. And again, like anyone could access empathy. You just have to practice and commit to it. And so there's two different ways I talk about primarily to access empathy. One is P2P listening, which is person to person listening. And what that is person to person below the surface listening, and it's active listening. So it's kind of like what we're doing today. Like when you're interviewing me, you are playing things back. I'm the only one in the room. You're not checking your phone. You aren't topping everything that I say. It's you're not saying, "Oh, that happened to me too," and I'm not saying that's bad, but that's not listening, right? You're again, that's when you're focused on yourself. Um, and so with P2P listening, you're focused on the other person and what they're saying, not what's in your own head. And then person of belonging listening is something that's really resonated with a lot of different teams I work with now. What it is that you're listening with multiple senses. And people have a really hard time with this. It sounds like a simple concept in the book, but people have a very hard time. And what it is that, and I tell a couple of examples in the book, and so people are like, wow, that happened. Like this leader did this. Yes, because we can all do it. And that's because you're there to empower the team as a leader. You're not there to like be the best at something. You're there to make them the best, right? You're not there for someone else. And so it's being able to kind of take a step out of yourself and kind of look around the room, listen to the room, and observe the extent to which people fit into an environment. And an easy way you could do that is, well, I won't say easy, I'll say accessible way you could do that is if you're someone that leads teams in your next team meeting, I want you to not be the team leader. And I want you to just sit and observe your team. Observe how they're interacting, observe who's talking the most, observe like people that look discontented, and do that at least once a month, maybe twice a month. Um, and that's person of belonging listening. You're going to get insights from people that you've never seen before. And I will tell you, it happens like that every single time. So try it this week. But that's person of belonging listening.
And on both levels, they're extremely hard, as you said, whether person to person listening or person to belonging listening. And they are critical in all kinds of relationships. I find, Latanya, that even in personal relationships, oftentimes we don't honor the other person enough by allowing them to put a period at the end of their sentence. And in most instances, when we ask questions, they're not questions where we intend to hear a full answer from the other person. So it is one of those skills that sounds simple, but it's extremely hard for us truly to be able to do it well and essential if we want to connect with the humanity of the other person.
Absolutely. And that's surface listening, what you just described. I talk about surface listening, below surface listening. And sometimes we need to surface listen, right? It's transactional listening. And sometimes we don't need to get deep, right? But it's as you said, it's going back and if you making sure that you are adapting to the kind of listening that you need to the situation. Unfortunately, so many people, their default is surface listening, where they ask you how you're doing, and then they're already tuned out. And so it's if you don't answer the question how they want, then they're going to tune out, right? It's gotta be something that connects them to you. And again, it's about them, not you.
Now, Latanya, in your own coaching practice, you also coach a lot of only ones within teams and organizations. And I know you've been involved in diversity, equity, and inclusion. And in many instances, you talk about the fact that that DEI initiatives have failed in making lasting change happen. And I totally agree with you. Why is it that many of the initiatives have failed at best and have been counterproductive at worst? And what can teams and organizations that truly want to do something with respect to having greater equity within their teams do differently than what has been done in the past?
Yeah, it's really sad, honestly, what that industry has become. I mean, again, 80-20 rule, there's probably 20% of folks that do it well. And I know most companies and 80% don't. The 80%, again, it's comes back to being surface, I think. It's surface DEI. Surface DEI is DEI that's like, okay, we're going to look at dashboards. We're going to hire 10 Black people. We're going to do all the things that make us look great on paper. We're going to win the most diverse company of the year. We're going to apply. I mean, I worked for companies and that was their departments that existed just to submit to these surveys. And so that's why it hasn't worked, you know, and how can it work? Well, the first thing I'll tell you, and my clients sweat when I tell them this, I'd say, don't hire a chief diversity officer. What? Are you kidding? Are you, what? No, okay, you could hire one, but if you do, wait a couple of years. Like get everything together first in-house, get the structures in place for this person to succeed, figure out what you want them to do. But at the end of the day, a chief diversity officer, and I'm going to go on a limb and say this, and some people might be upset with me for saying this, but what they should be doing, is project managing, right? They should be project managing. They should be, kind of being like, they should be a C-suite level. They should be the face of, DEI. They should be leading a team that's doing this work. But a lot of it, it's project managing and stakeholder management. That's pretty much what DEI, heads of DEI do. What happens is when you hire this person right away, right, you're just not ready. You don't know what you want them to do. You're just hiring them because you know you need to focus on this area, but you have no idea what that, I mean, it's like hiring, would you hire a head of innovation without having any idea what they're going to innovate? Right? I mean, no, but think about it. Would you? Would you? I mean, you wouldn't. You wouldn't hire. You wouldn't hire like an HR, a CHRO without having things for them to actually do or knowing what they're going to actually do, right? And so, like, you hire a CHRO when you're ready, right? Like that's what people say. Like, they'll like, startups I work with a lot of startups. They'll start with hiring a bunch of recruiters, and then when they're ready for that CHRO, when they're ready to have an HR structure and that there's a place for them on the team, then they hire that person. Same thing has to be with a chief diversity officer. And typically what that means is like having the leadership team figure out what that role is over time and do that with a coach. Don't just do that on your own, do that with a coach. And really make room for that person, for them to succeed and for your organization to succeed. Because I've seen so much, especially last year. It's going to be interesting to see how this all shakes out in a year or two. But there's this hiring spree for chief diversity officers, and it's going to be interesting to see in a year or two, like, has anything changed? And I'm sorry, but I don't think anything will, which is really crazy. And so that's so if you are a chief diversity officer, get leading below the surface and have your leaders read it. I know as chief diversity officers, you're always looking for stuff to push your leaders, and this is a way that you can and to take your work to the next level, especially if you're a DEI officer that has no support and you hate your job and you want to leave and go somewhere else.
It does take a lot of effort on behalf of the people that are given that responsibility, because in many instances, LaTonya, what I find is organizations are putting out press releases or taking actions to show they are doing something rather than a true intention to have the kind of conversations that it takes. One of the things I love that you say is diversity and inclusion doesn't start with training. The way to do it right is real listening sessions. How can organizations use the listening sessions or those conversations to increase the understanding of the teams and have people embrace that value of diversity and inclusion rather than the standard training in most instances people go through?
Yeah, so listening sessions are interesting. I do a lot of those with clients, and um, it's interesting. I'll do it with clients ranging from clients that have all white workplaces to clients that want to target BIPOC or queer employees to in these listening sessions. And so I would say there's a common thread, and what it is that these are listening sessions are not focus groups. They are an opportunity to hear what's going on non-judgmentally and in a way that you're practicing P2P and P2P listening. And I'll have people read that chapter on empathy so they understand. I'll have leaders sit in on these. But how can you, I think your question was how can you use these? Well, I always think you should hire a outside person to run these. Why? I've worked inside, I've worked in house, and no one trusts HR. I'm sorry, they don't. They don't trust HR. And if your diversity folks are spending time facilitating listening sessions, again, I don't know if that's the right thing. Should they be a part of it? Yeah, for sure. But again, it's and I don't have anything I can say like concretely that this works. This is anecdotal, but it's just much better to have someone outside that doesn't know any of the past or drama, or it's a new face. You want it to be a face that looks like the people, or that is a trained coach and knows how to listen deeply and not judge. And it's really hard to do that in-house. I've had some clients ask me to do them and then do a train the trainer. And I get really nervous about that because who's going to run these? And you got to be trained pretty deeply to be able to run these pretty successfully. Because again, I think we're so used to surface practices in organizations that a lot of people, when they're running these, it's really a focus group and it's not a listening session. And, one of the first things that how it's different is that, we do empathy setting up front and we do psychological safety setting up front. And a lot of people just don't know how to do that. If they're not trained, like a trained coach that's done this. So yeah, I would access them that way, bring in outside people, probably do them regularly. You could do them around different topics. I've done them around everything from, anti-racism, racism in companies, to, inclusive culture, to just, making things a better workplace. So there's been, also hybrid work environments, like what are people's concerns with coming back to work? So you can't really overdo listening sessions. You can't. And so it's just being very clear about what to use them for and bringing in the right people to do it. And again, this is not a huge undertaking if you bring in someone to do them every single time. I think again, that doesn't mean you can't be in it. And it's probably better because then if it's like your DEI folks that are in it with the coach, then they can kind of focus on the listening part of it instead of trying to take notes and do all that stuff.
And as you say, Latanya, the intentionality behind why it is that you're doing it makes a difference. If you're doing it just as a jump hoop, something to jump through to say we've done it, we've held listening sessions at the lowest expense, most efficiently scheduled, maybe the internal resources will suffice. If you're doing it because you truly want to listen and listen at a much deeper level, then it's worthwhile having someone who is a professional with an outside perspective bringing that listening to it. But I love how you go into that. Again, partly because I think that level of deep listening is critical and is missing. I had a conversation with Vanessa Bonds. Love her book. It's on You Have More Influence Than You Think. And one of the examples she gives is that oftentimes we assume because we know someone with a similar experience that we understand their experience. And she gives the example of divorce. If someone has been divorced, the other person has been divorced, they say, well, I already know what they've been through. Not at all, because two people that have been divorced can have drastically different experiences. Same thing with the experiences of people within your organization. The experiences of two people of color with similar backgrounds are not the same. They each have individual experiences. Therefore, adding real value to those listening sessions and understanding and connecting with the individuality and the individual humanity of each one of those team members.
Absolutely. And it's I love that you said that because it is, and I got to check this book out because it's so different. And when I talk about this, it's like microaggressions, right? Like, you could microaggress one person and they might be like, whatever. And the next person, it might be like the worst thing ever. And eventually push them out the door. So it's, yeah, that's why it's so important to do these and to, again, find someone that can facilitate effectively so your folks can listen and really truly know what's going on.
Now, I love the book Leading Below the Surface, Latanya. And so, in addition to your book, are there any other leadership practices or leadership books or resources that you typically find yourself recommending to others?
Yeah, so as far as practices, I think anything that has to do with embodiments, so anything that has to do with somatic work or embodiment, I highly recommend it. Again, I think a lot of this is getting deep, and so I would that would be my thing is like there's also a book called Radical Dharma that I really like, and again, it's like it's again it's like getting deep into yourself and more self-awareness. So anything that is again more focused, I know this is not going to be a conventional answer, but anything that's more focused on you getting deep and a tool for that is what I would recommend. And less of, I mean, again, I mean, you could see my bookshelf as we're talking. I read a lot of books, and but again, I think that there's so many books that are focused on the surface things in life. And so again, try to find some unconventional ways to get deeper in yourself first, and then kind of go from there. And pick whatever you want. I mean, whatever you whatever you like. Some people like things from, again, like Buddhist influence. Some people like things from Christian influence. Some people like things that are non-secular, like more secular. Um, and again, it's like in somatic, is not, it's more just embodiment. And there's so many books out there. I wouldn't say there's one I would recommend. I mean, there's a lot out there. I love the integral leadership stuff too. And so that's a whole, I'm sure you've heard of it. I love, again, that's like my body, spirit, like everything's together. And so that's the kind of stuff. I know it might sound like hippie kind of stuff to you, but that's the kind of stuff that you have to do in order to get deeper in yourself. And yeah, that's what it looks like. So
And that depth is important as we try to understand ourselves and lead more effectively. So, Latanya, how best would the audience find out more about you, your work, and your book?
Yeah, so leadingbelowthesurface.com is my site. So that's the store. And then you can order the book from many different places on that page. There's also tools and resources. I'm also active on Instagram at LaTonya Coaching. And then Twitter, I tweet here or there. You'll see me on there sometimes. But don't get mad if I'm late responding to you. That's LaTonya Wilkins. And then LinkedIn, I'm very active on. So, and that's just LaTonya Wilkins. So definitely, if you're wondering, LinkedIn's probably the best place if you're social, or Instagram. I know some people like Instagram better.
Outstanding. I truly appreciate both the book, Latanya, and the conversation for the Partnering Leadership podcast.
Yeah, it was an honor to be here. I really enjoyed talking to you.